I stood behind the closed doors of the venue and held my bouquet so still that my hand stopped feeling like mine. The garden ahead was everything I had spent 18 months building toward: string lights threaded through cedar beams, white ranunculus climbing the wooden arch. 140 people seated in clean rows on either side of an aisle I was about to walk down. My father's hand rested over mine and he leaned in close, his voice low and warm, asking if I was ready. I told him I was, and I meant it, because everything inside me had been pointing toward this one moment for 4 years, and I had no reason yet to doubt any of it. The doors opened, and the string quartet lifted into the first measure of something I had chosen 6 months before, and that was the last second of certainty I would have for a very long time. Not because of anything loud, not because of anything I could have prepared for, but because of a ripple. A small physical shift in the crowd, heads turning left toward the garden side entrance. The kind of collective movement that happens when something enters a room that has no business being there. I didn't look away from it. I couldn't. A woman walked in through that entrance like she had every right to, wearing jeans, a fitted jacket, moving with the ease of someone who had been given the address and told exactly when to arrive. I did not need anyone to tell me who she was, because I had seen her face exactly once before. In a photograph Marcus kept in a box he thought I didn't know about. Jade Merritt. My father's grip on my hand tightened just slightly, and I understood he had seen her too. And then Marcus moved. Not toward me, not toward the altar, but away from both, turning fast and walking through the seated rows and then breaking into a full run across the grass. His body didn't hesitate, and there was nothing in his stride that looked like confusion or surprise. He reached her and pulled her in and held on, and I watched his shoulders drop the way they only drop when someone finally stops bracing for something they've been carrying alone. I stood at the threshold of my own wedding and understood, with a clarity that doesn't ask permission and doesn't wait, that I was not the person Marcus had been standing there waiting for. It wasn't the hug itself that broke something open in me. It was the mechanics of it. The specific way his arms went around her, the way his whole body exhaled into the contact, like a man setting down something he had been carrying for too long. I study human behavior for a living, and I know the difference between a hug that says, "I'm surprised you're here," and one that says, "I've been waiting." What I watched from the entrance of my own wedding was the second kind, before my heart had even finished catching up. When they pulled apart, Jade cupped his face with both hands and spoke quickly. Words meant only for him, and Marcus nodded and smiled. Not the polite smile of someone managing an awkward moment. It was the kind that starts from somewhere behind the eyes, the kind that surfaces when a person feels genuinely relieved. And I had spent 4 years learning every version of Marcus's face well enough to know exactly what I was seeing. The guests around me had gone so quiet I could hear the fountain near the far fence, still running like nothing in the world had just shifted. I am a UX researcher. My entire career is built on watching people reveal what they actually want in the moments they stop performing. The gap between what someone says and what their body does when no one has told it what to do yet. And standing there in my wedding dress, I was watching Marcus's body tell the truth his words never had. Then I noticed Jade's jacket, the teal blouse underneath it. A very specific shade I recognized immediately, because 3 months before, Marcus had texted me asking which color looked better for a gift he was buying for his sister. I had helped him choose it. His sister had never mentioned receiving anything. I turned to my maid of honor, my grip on the bouquet finally loosening, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "We need to go," I told her, and she looked at my face for 1 second before she nodded and reached for my arm, and that was all either of us needed to say. I walked toward the microphone the way you walk when the decision is already made, and your body just hasn't told anyone else yet. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Cutting across the side of the garden, while 140 people tracked the movement and the quartet let the last note dissolve into silence. The officiant stepped back instinctively when I reached for the stand. and I didn't look at Marcus. Not yet. Because I already knew what his face would be doing, and I didn't need it to change anything. I kept my voice even and said there wasn't going to be a wedding today. A few people laughed nervously. The reflex kind. The kind that happens when a brain refuses to process what it just heard. I told the guests that the reception was already paid for, that the food was there, the bar was open, and that they should stay and enjoy themselves. Consider it a party, I said, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing I had heard all day. Heavier than the music. Heavier than the moment the doors first opened. That was when Marcus finally turned. He was still standing near Jade. Still close enough that the distance between them said everything without a word. And the look on his face had shifted from relief into something that looked like a man watching a controlled demolition and realizing too late that he was standing inside the building. He pushed through the guests toward me, his voice carrying over the crowd, asking what I was doing. I looked at him with the same steadiness I had carried from the entrance to the microphone and said it quietly enough that only the people closest to us could hear. What you should have done a long time ago. I handed the microphone back to the officiant, turned to my maid of honor, and walked out of that garden without looking back at the arch, the flowers, or the version of my future I had just closed the door on. I booked a flight to Portland that same evening and checked into the resort alone. And the first night I slept straight through because my body had made a decision my mind was still catching up to. 6 days I stayed there, not to heal in any clean sense, but to stop moving long enough to look back at 4 years without anyone standing next to me trying to explain them. By the time I flew home to Seattle, I already knew exactly what the next step was. I texted Marcus from the airport, "I'm coming to get my things." He responded in under a minute, asking me to talk first. I didn't answer. When I pulled into the parking lot of the apartment we had shared, 3 cars were already there. Marcus's, Diane's, and one I recognized as Jade's, parked 2 spaces over like she had been given directions and told to stay. Marcus opened the door before I knocked, looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. Wearing sweatpants like grief had become his uniform. A week before, that would have pulled something out of me. Now it just registered as information. Diane was standing in the living room with her arms crossed, Caleb beside her looking like a man already regretting being there, and Jade on the couch, rising halfway when she saw me before thinking better of it. I looked at Marcus and asked why Jade was there. He said it wasn't like that, and I laughed. A short, involuntary sound. Because there are moments when something is so precisely absurd, your body finds the exit before your brain does. "You're right," I told him. "It's worse." Then I walked past him toward the bedroom and started packing with the focus of someone who had already done this 100 times in her head. Marcus followed me room to room, cycling through, "Please stop and I love you, and it doesn't have to be final." And when he said he loved me, I stopped and faced him. "You loved what I gave you," I said. "Stability. A future that didn't cost you enough. That is not the same thing." On the 3rd trip out, I unplugged the television I had bought and paid for myself. And Marcus asked with genuine disbelief if I was really taking that too. "Did you think public betrayal came with a complimentary electronics package?" I said, and Caleb turned away to hide whatever crossed his face. Diane pivoted to money, citing the full wedding cost and implying legal obligation. I opened my phone, pulled up the folder I had kept for months, every contract and deposit confirmation, and held the screen toward her so she could see the signature lines. Marcus's name. Diane's name. Not mine. Not on a single binding document. "The rest is between you and your son," I said, and her face went still. Marcus followed me to the parking lot and reached my car door just before I opened it, his voice cracking, asking why it had to be this way. I looked at him and said it quietly, "Because, in the most important moment of our relationship, you showed me exactly where I stood." He said he chose me now. I said it was too late, got in, and drove away. The information didn't come from Marcus. It came from Ryan Ashford, a colleague who had worked alongside Marcus at the agency for 2 years and was quietly deciding whether to stay or leave when the story started unraveling. Ryan called me not to confess anything on Marcus's behalf, but because he needed to confirm something before he made his own decision. And what he told me in that conversation settled into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. Marcus and Jade had been in contact for at least 7 months before the wedding. And Jade had not shown up that day out of unfinished emotion or poor judgment. She had been asked to come. The plan, as Ryan understood it, was to create a situation dramatic enough that I would be the one to walk away. So Marcus could tell everyone the wedding fell apart due to circumstances, rather than because he had chosen to end it. He didn't want to lose the financial stability I represented while he was already hemorrhaging a major client. He wanted the exit without the accountability. I sat with that for nearly an hour before I called Vanessa. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. And when I finished, she said, "Okay, where do we start?" And the way she said "we," quiet and certain, was the only moment that week I came close to crying. Vanessa had been a paralegal long enough to know exactly which calls to make and which documents to pull together. And within 2 days, I was sitting across from an attorney whose practice focused on civil harassment and workplace interference under Washington state law. The cease and desist letter was drafted to cover direct contact, third-party pressure, and any professional interference. Sent certified mail, so Marcus had to sign for it personally. The domino effect that followed was not something I engineered. Ryan left the agency and was candid with people in their shared professional network about why. And in the media and brand consulting world in Seattle, which is smaller than it looks from the outside, that kind of candor travels fast and sticks. Marcus lost his primary retainer client within weeks. Jade lost 3 event contracts because vendors and planners she relied on for referrals were connected to the same network. And once your name gets attached to a story like this one, clients in that industry find quieter alternatives without ever making it official. Neither of them was publicly called out. Neither of them was targeted. The professional world simply recalibrated around what it now knew about both of them. Caleb sent me a short text around that time. 3 sentences. No explanation. Just, "I'm sorry for what my family put you through. You didn't deserve any of it." I read it once, didn't respond, and kept it. Not because I needed the validation, but because sometimes a single, honest voice in the middle of a lot of noise is worth holding on to. The cease and desist letter had already been drafted and sent before Marcus even realized the professional fallout had started. And that sequencing mattered because it meant the legal boundary was established while he was still trying to figure out which fire to put out first. The attorney Vanessa connected me with was straightforward about what the letter covered under Washington state law: direct contact, third-party pressure routed through family or mutual connections, and any interference with my professional standing. It was sent certified mail. Marcus had to sign for it personally. After that, the noise level dropped in a way that felt almost physical, like pressure releasing from a room. The quiet that followed was not dramatic. It was just my new apartment on a Tuesday morning. Rain against the east-facing windows. Coffee I made without asking anyone's preference. Furniture I placed without negotiating. There was no single moment where I registered that I was free. It accumulated slowly, in small decisions that belonged entirely to me. The color I painted the bedroom wall. The rug I bought without compromise. The hours I kept without explanation to anyone. Marcus missed the rent deadline on the apartment they had shared and then missed the extension. And 30 days after that, the eviction notice came through the same network of mutual connections that had been carrying every piece of news since the wedding. Diane and her husband found Marcus a studio across town. The kind of place that functions less like a home and more like a consequence. And from what reached me through shared connections, Diane made sure he understood daily exactly what it was costing her. Then came the detail that arrived quietly but landed precisely. Jade got married. Not to Marcus, to the man she had been engaged to for months before she ever walked through that garden entrance. The man who had been waiting for her while she performed a favor for someone who was not worth it. The photos traveled through the usual channels. Marcus saw them. And according to the same people who had been tracking all of it, that was the moment something in him finally stopped pretending. I did not feel triumphant when I heard that. I felt the specific, settled certainty of someone watching the last number in a long equation finally resolve. She had chosen her future before stepping into his past. And what he had dismantled to reach for her had already been gone before he even understood what he had done. A message came through on a number I didn't have saved. And I knew immediately who it was before I even finished reading the preview. Marcus said he was in therapy now. That his therapist had asked him to take accountability. And what followed was the most honest thing he had said to me in 4 years. He had never fully let Jade go. He had handled none of it correctly. And I had deserved better than what he gave me. He said he didn't expect forgiveness and wasn't asking for it. He just wanted me to know that he understood now. I read it twice, set my phone down, and sat with it for a few minutes, the way you sit with something that confirms what you already knew, but needed to see written out by the person who owed you the truth. I typed back that I appreciated him saying it, that I hoped therapy gave him what he was looking for, and that we had nothing left to discuss. "Don't contact me again," I wrote, and then I sent it and blocked the number. Not out of anger, but because closure is not a door you leave cracked open to see if someone will walk back through it. Rebecca sent one final message not long after. The kind designed to sound like concern while functioning as pressure, telling me Marcus had nothing now and that I could help him if I wanted to. I read it once and typed back that he had exactly what he had built for himself. Then blocked her too. Diane never reached out again directly, which was its own kind of answer about how much of her earlier outrage had been performance. What I had instead was a Tuesday morning at Green Lake, walking a rescue dog named Rocket, who had too much energy and a habit of checking over his shoulder every 30 seconds to confirm I was still there. And the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like absence but like room. My east-facing bedroom got light before 7, which I had not had in the apartment I shared with Marcus because he kept the curtains drawn. And I noticed that every single morning without ever deciding to notice it. The rays came through at work a few weeks later. And my manager mentioned in passing that my focus over the past months had been some of the sharpest he had seen from me. I didn't explain why. I already knew. I started seeing someone new. Nothing urgent. Nothing performed. Just a person who was easy to be around and didn't carry unresolved weight into every room he entered. The first time I told him the full story, he was quiet for a moment, and then said it sounded like the universe had decided to intervene on my behalf. I smiled because that was closer to the truth than anything else anyone had offered me. People still asked occasionally whether I regretted the microphone, whether I wished I had handled it more privately, and my answer was always the same: no. Because what happened in that garden was not a reaction. It was a revelation. And you cannot regret seeing clearly. The version of my life I had been building with Marcus was not a future that got interrupted. It was a structure with a fault line running through the center of it that I had not been allowed to see until the moment it was most important to see. And what I walked away from that day was not a wedding. It was a version of myself who would have kept trying to make something stable out of something that was never going to hold. If you stayed through all of this, thank you. Genuinely. Some of what I shared here lives close to my own life, and I don't take lightly that you gave it your time. I hope you find your own quiet morning, your own room that finally feels like yours. That peace exists. I promise it does. See you next time.